How do you improve your search engine optimization and attract more of the right clients? Our guest today is Damon Burton. And over a decade ago, he actually beat $1 billion company by outranking their website on Google. And we're going to learn a little bit about how he did that. He also went on to develop an international search engine marketing company, and he's been helping big and small clients to make more in a month than they used to make in a year. And so I'm sure there's a few people that would be interested in hearing how to do that, and myself included. Hey, why not, right? We can grow at every level that we're at. And so I invited him here to talk about his SEO secrets and how to navigate this, ever-changing algorithm world, and how organic SEO traffic converts better than paid traffic, paid ad traffic. And so we're going to have a really great conversation here today, I know for sure. So Damon, welcome to the Leaders Transformation.
Thanks, Nicole. I appreciate the opportunity to chat. And yeah, there's a lot of fun things we'll jump into.
Yeah, likewise. And before we dive in, I do want to do a shout out to the team at Command Your Brand. I always do a shout out to those that are recommending amazing guests, and they're awesome. Their team is awesome. Of course, Jeremy Slade is awesome. He's got his own amazing podcast, which I've been on. And I just want to say thank you for continuing to support this show. And they're just, yeah, as I said, they're great. So tell us about this story. I'd love to hear how you beat this $1 billion company and outranked their website with just your own, where you were at that time.
Yeah, so I've been at this for 17 years now. So now I've done it a few times, but the first one and the funnest one is the one I usually share. And so this was before SEO was my world, and it was when I was kind of dabbling in it. We might get into my whole backstory, but the part that's relevant to this is I used to be big into cars in my early 20s. And so I started a car enthusiast website, started to learn SEO basics then. And so I would just kind of tinker around on the side. And then it was around 2006, and my wife likes to watch The Bachelor. And so she said, "Hey, it's a season finale. Let's watch this together." And I was watching The Bachelor with her. And from what I had remembered in the season finales before, they would leave a cliffhanger. And so it'd be like, all right, that's a wrap, and come back in a couple weeks and see who the next guy is. But this time they said, come back after the commercial to see who the next guy is. And so that really stood out to me. And I knew it had to be intentional. I didn't know why. And so now I was curious from a marketing perspective. And so we sat and watched. They announced this next gentleman. I started looking online, and I could find so little information about him because I was trying to find out why they're doing things different, if this guy is special or what's going on. And as I was trying to find this, and I got thinking, I think I know search engines better than the average person, and I'm not a diehard fan, and I can't find anything about this guy. And so just imagine all the other people that are diehard fans and don't know how to navigate search engines. They're going to be having an even more complicated time. And so I thought, why don't I be the one that solves that problem? So I told my wife, I said, hey, I'm gonna be in the other room, and I'm gonna spend an hour or two, and I'm gonna build a website. So what I did is I went through and I found out information about this gentleman, created some biography pages, basically created an unofficial fan site. And then through the SEO things that I knew about, which we'll probably go deeper in as we talk, what ended up happening is I ended up outranking ABC, a multi-billion-dollar company, for their Bachelor show. And so threw some ads on there, made a couple $1,000s in passive income through it. And so it was a great experience because that was when I was first getting into it. And it kind of better illustrated the potential of what's possible with SEO. But what I've learned the most from that experience in retrospect is the simplicity of SEO. And if you think about why that website performed well, is because it solved the problem. And the problem it solved was people wanted to know who this guy was, and also find hunky shirtless pictures of him. And so all I had to do was create an easy to navigate, user-friendly website, which are core things in SEO these days. Can people access it quickly? Is it mobile friendly? And can they find the things that they want to find? And I was able to do that and took those lessons from there. And now it's made a great little mini story and case study.
Wow. There's so much in there when you think about, number one, you sitting there watching a show with your wife, The Bachelor of all shows, with your wife. Most guys are like, whatever, and you're watching this show in your mind. I was just thinking about how your mind works, where you were thinking through what was happening and why it was happening and all of that. And how many people are, and I'm just going to kind of step out from the SEO world for a moment and think about how many people are are doing something they don't even know they're doing, or that their mind works a certain way and they just take it for granted and they don't realize there's a multi-million-dollar business that potentially that could be attached to that thought process, just like yours. So I think that's really, really interesting. And then the fact that you actually went and built this website, and the simplicity of it, the simplicity of SEO, because I think, and maybe we can talk and dive a little bit further into that right now, is a lot of people, when we think about SEO, we think it's complicated, right? Like we've got to figure out the algorithms, we've got to do all these things. And what you're saying is it's very simple. You're solving a problem, you're solving a need. Somebody wants information and they want to be able to find it. But now in the world that we're living in, there's so much information. How do you keep it simple, even in that noisy, in that noisy market?
Yeah, it's a good question. The concepts are what's simple, right? There's a lot that goes into SEO, but you can really distill it down to just three kind of buckets. And so the first bucket is how good or bad is your website built? And so is it easy to navigate? Does it load quickly? Is it mobile friendly? And those matter because, you, just like I, like all the listeners, none of us like a slow loading website, or we go on one on our phone and it's complicated to use. And so Google basically says, well, treat us like a visitor. So the things that matter to visitors matter to us, and they weigh them accordingly. So the first bucket is just the design. And a lot of us overthink it, and we think we need like this visually stunning artistic piece that has to like be mind blowing. And it's quite the opposite for many reasons. One is simplistic designs consistently perform better because there's less noise, there's less distractions. Like I see the thing I want, I buy it and I go. And then it also helps with the page speed because the more stuff we add, the more the website has to load, the more it slows it down. So simplicity almost always wins. The second bucket is content. So you can only show up on Google for what Google can read, what it can understand you offer. So do you clearly communicate your products and services and your value propositions? And then the third category is what I call external credibility. So it's, do other people talk about your brand? Do they link to your website? Do you show up in the news? And so out of those three, most of where you get your visibility is from the latter two, the content credibility. But that will only work if you have a well-built website. So what I recommend to listeners is lock in the website because it's a one and done, right? Fix it and move on. You don't have to touch it all the time. You don't always have to fix what isn't broken. So get a good loading design and then just focus on your content credibility. Why are you different? Why do you have better value propositions? Why are you more of an authority than your competition? And maybe the last thing we can touch on this topic is the simplicity of like content. You had mentioned something about how do you continue to bring something value added and with so much noise going on in the world. And this is another great way to think about the simplicity of SEO, or at least not overcomplicating it, is you usually sell a product or a service because you are more passionate about it than other people, or it is better than the competition. So either you're better or the product is better. And so those are great value propositions to talk about. And what a lot of people overthink is that they need to have the catchiest messaging and they need to have the fanciest logo. But at the end of the day, for a big chunk of services, a lot of people buy when they relate on the human element. So for example, I run a multi-million-dollar agency and I don't spend any money on ads whatsoever. And what happens is people follow me for my business advice and expertise, but when they convert is when they see the personal branding and the message that says, oh, he loves his wife. Well, I love my wife too. So that person, I can relate to them or I can trust them. And so when you share your unique perspective, instead of always trying to go, oh, I need to do what that guy does and the competition does and the big influencer does, you do the opposite. Those people took off because they did something different. So you too need to do something different.
And I love this focus on the human element of it, the personal story on it. How does that work when it comes to um, keywords, right? For people to get there. So once they're there, right, they go, oh, this is so interesting. Damon loves his wife, I love mine, and all of that. And how do you get them there when it comes to like, because you have to have, like, maybe that's the icing on the cake, perhaps, like you use keywords to get them there, and then from there, then you got to keep them, right? You got to get them there, and then you got to keep. Can you talk a little bit about that process?
Yeah, so it's evolved over the years. So now it's kind of the opposite. So you still look into keywords, not so much because you stuff them on your website anymore.
Right.
You do need them in places so Google understands what you offer, but now it's good enough to understand the general industry that you're in based on kind of the aggregate of how you talk and the things you say. But the reason why keywords are so important is because you need to figure out where your audience is. And so the problem with a lot of people when they write content is they know it's important, so they just write for the sake of writing. They don't write with intent behind it. And it's getting even worse with AI because everybody's like, well, I can write 57 blogs in 10 minutes now because I just put in Chat GPT and now I'm the best content writer in the world. Well, you're actually doing the opposite. You're creating a problem and you're diluting the clarity of your messaging. You're missing an opportunity to showcase your individual personality. And now you sound the same and generic and robotic like everybody else. So what you do is you use these tools where, and I can give you a couple examples of tools in a minute, but there's tools out there that say, what are people already asking? And you don't necessarily have to go for the one that has the most volume. You want to go for the one that has the lines the best with buyer intent. So I would way rather have 7 out of a low 10 search volume people convert than 1 out of 10,000. And so you need to look past the vanity metrics and look more along the lines of buyer intent. So use these tools and go, okay, these are the things that I relate to what I sell. Then you can take those and put them into a different tool, and these tools will say, well, what do people search about those? And what that's communicating to you is your buyer's existing pain points and problems you're trying to solve. And so that's your opportunity to go, okay, I can see that there's demand around this pain point to solve. Here's how my product solves it, and then you bridge that gap, and then that's where you tell the story and how you either created the product or how that the uniqueness of that individual circumstance of whatever pain point it is. So it's way more important to focus on quality over quantity when it comes to content, because Google's looking for these unique perspectives. I mean, if you use, there are some circumstances to use AI. I don't have to explain why AI is attractive, but what a lot of people skip over is, are you using it with intent? Or are you just using it because it's the newest trend and you just mass produce generic stuff? So focus on your unique history, your ability to translate or be relatable to your audience. And those are the things. So back to your question about keywords at this point or that point and how people come in. Well, what happens is if you look into the keywords that have your customer's pain point, you write a unique story, it's actually the unique story that's going to bring people in. So Google will actually give you the benefit of the doubt a lot of times if it goes, well, Nicole's story is way different than everybody else's. And, there's 100 over here that sound pretty similar, and then Nicole's sounds significantly different, but it's still value added. So let's give that a shot, and it'll do what's called kind of sandboxing. It'll give you the benefit of the doubt, move you up higher, and go, let's see how it works out. And if you get good click-throughs and good engagement, then it goes, yeah, let's leave it there.
Interesting. I love this because I don't know a lot about it. I know the gist of it, but then there's things that are changing. And yeah, I love that you were just saying how Google actually can recognize a unique story and say, hey, let's test this and give it a go. And then there's what are the metrics that it's actually looking for?
So it's those 3 core components, those 3 buckets, right? And there's
Okay.
subsets of them, but generally it's always and always has been those same 3 things.
Okay.
So it's the structure,
Hmm.
it's your content, and your credibility. Now let's look at how algorithms have evolved over the years, because the algorithms have certainly evolved, but they all reverse engineer into one or multiples of those same core buckets. So let's go way back to 2011 and 2012. So those are 2 of the most notorious, scariest algorithms that Google's had. And so one was called Panda and one was called Penguin, and one of them focused on content and one of them focused on credibility. Now, I'm going to mostly talk about the Panda algorithm because it's kind of come full circle with AI. And so the Panda algorithm was about quality content, because back then there used to be tools called spinners, and they still exist. They just don't, they're not effective. But what a spinner was is I could go, okay, well, I sell a product. I don't know what to write about, but I know I need content. So I'm gonna go to Wikipedia and I'm just gonna copy Wikipedia, or I'm gonna copy my competitors. And then you put it in this tool. And then what the tool does is it shuffles around the paragraphs, swaps out synonyms. So it still has a similar message, but the literal verbiage is different. And so Google came out with an algorithm update that says we can catch on to these patterns. It's not unique value added content, so let's punish them. And that just crushed the industry, which was great for me at the time because I was always kind of hesitant, and it was kind of a roll of the dice for me back then because I could see it was working, but at the same time, I'm like, if I can see these patterns, Google's algorithm is infinitely smarter than I am. So do I play along and, take advantage of it, or do I miss some opportunity and cross my fingers and hope it pays off later? And I crossed my fingers and hoped it paid off later, and it did. And so all these other SEOs, their customers got hurt, and because they got hurt, the agencies got hurt. A lot went out of business, and so that was really when I started to grow, is because I kind of took the proactive approach of how to solve this problem. So now you fast forward, and AI nowadays, from a content perspective, is largely the same. It's just taking a mass aggregate of content and shuffling it around and swapping out synonyms. It's certainly smarter, certainly has a deeper database, certainly better at writing, but at its core, it's still very similar. So when we think about all these algorithm updates, I'll give you maybe just one more as an example. In 2016, there was a big update. It was called Mobile Get-In. And this is when everything went mobile first, mobile friendly, where that's when the majority of audiences had kind of pivoted and now we're on mobile devices instead of desktops and laptops. And so this is where Google said, well, now we're going to favor websites that are more mobile friendly. And so what does that mean? Well, bucket number one, structure, has to have a clean design, which is easy to use on a small device, has to load quickly. And which websites do we trust that we can display for these mobile users? So that credibility, and then content that has the answers for what they're searching. So out of any algorithm to date, that may change in the future. They've all backed into just those same core three fundamentals.
So we actually had a guest on recently who was talking about AI, and he was using it for editing his original content and making it customized as opposed to looking for it to tell him what to write about. So that's just confirming what you're saying. He was just saying, look, I've got my original content, and then I'm going to go in and have it like massage it a little bit, improve using whatever tool he was using just to make it sound a little bit better and more targeted to a specific audience, different audiences, and utilize it as an editor as opposed to the creator. So interesting. Let's talk about paid ads, because I know I have a lot of clients who think that they need to pour all this money into paid ads and that's how they're going to get clients. And you talk about even on your website, right? Like how, I know you have a free giveaway that, talks about outranking and all that kind of stuff. We can talk about that later, but this, you're banking on this, literally on this SEO and saying, look, you can get it for free. What are the benefits, and drawbacks to using paid ads versus SEO?
Yeah, it's a good question. Every form of marketing has advantages and disadvantages, SEO included. So it's not really a zero-sum game, or where I've never been a marketer to throw rocks at other forms of marketing. And so every opportunity will depend on the position that you're in. And so I'll give you some examples. Paid ads are nice because they're a lot quicker to set up, right? You can have an ad account running in a day or two. Now, setting up doesn't mean profitable. And so that's usually where we start to see the difference between the marketing bros that pitch one over the other, because the pay-per-click marketing bros will say SEO takes forever and paid ads is, nearly instant. Kind of not, right? Because paid ads, yes, you can get set up quickly, but you're still usually burning money for 3 to 6 months before you get the right avatar identified, figure out which ad works, which copywriting works, which target audience works. And so, yes, it's quick to set up. That doesn't mean it's quick to monetize. And so the opposite on SEO, SEO does take time. You're usually a month in just to fix the structure. And, we talked about where your audience is and keywords. You have to go through all that data. So you're a good 4 to 8 weeks in just to figure out what the game plan is. And with paid ads, you are constantly renting your audience. And the cost per click is always changing. And generally speaking, it's always increasing over time. And then you always have ad compliance issues, especially I hear this more of a complaint on Facebook than Google. Certain industries you can't do ads on. Other industries that are completely normal, you just get shut down for no reason. You could have an ad that's running great for 3 years and it's your bread and butter, and tomorrow you wake up and for no reason, for no warning, it's completely gone and your ad account's shut down. And so there's a lot of people talk about, SEO and the algorithms change all the time. I think the compliance issues and the algorithms of paid ads change way more. I mean, maybe literally speaking, the algorithm changes a lot, but the impact of them is a lot smaller in frequency. So it just kind of depends. I mean, paid ads are nice because you can get a very quantifiable return. You put $1 in and you get $2 out. SEO is a wild card. It's $1 in and nothing out for a while, but then the multiple is a lot higher when it starts to take effect. Instead of $1 in and two out, it's $1 in, $5,000 out. And so it just depends on what your tolerance and your cash flow is for your patience. So generally speaking, you can see progress in maybe 6 months, but you don't monetize it until it gets to page one. So you might see your website go from oblivion to page 10 to page 5, which is great jumps, but until you get to page one, you're not monetizing it. So it just depends on your cash flow and patience across the different opportunities.
When you say that you don't monetize it until you get to page one, is that because of Google, the way that Google operates, or is because nobody goes past page one?
Because nobody goes past page one. Yeah.
Okay.
It's the general statistics are somewhere along the lines of the first result on page one gets 30 to 40% of every click. The second position gets 20 to 30%. The third position gets 10%. Then there's another shared 10% between positions 4 through 10. And then whatever remains after that is page 2 plus. So, 70% of the traffic is in those first three results.
So what about the results that are sponsored and paid ads, really? Do they pull as much as that? Does that apply to that, or does it change?
So those positions we just went over just for organic. And what's
Okay.
interesting is there's a company by the name of Conductor that did a survey a while ago. They had a really fascinating chart. And so you can just search, Conductor traffic distribution or something like that and find that. But they did this pie chart, and what was really cool is it showed, all of us think that paid ads is a giant, which it is. It's where Google gets the majority of its revenue, even in addition to their Android phones and all these other things. But this chart showed that if you're doing well at paid ads and you're doing well at SEO or social, keep doing it. But look at how much money you're leaving on the table. And what it illustrated was out of, and this is kind of generalized, like it'll vary by industry, but out of all the traffic sources from source to website based on, organic search, organic social versus paid search versus paid social, only 6% of it went to paid ads. 2% of it went to social media, and 64% of it went to organic.
Wow.
And so it wasn't even in the same ballpark because what happens is we get what's called banner blindness. So even though the ad is positioned first, we know it's an ad, and so we just move right past it.
I totally do that.
Yeah,
I totally was like, oh, sponsored. So that doesn't mean that Google thinks it's the best. It just means that they're actually paying to be up there. And so my mind I always just skip to what's organic because that's probably going to be the most relevant.
right.
So
Yeah.
yeah. Which speaks to another question that I have for you is conversion. So,
Mm.
there's this much smaller percentage like to these paid ads, but even if they do get the traffic to their site, what is the difference in conversion? Somebody SEO versus paid ad, or is that kind of like what we're talking about? People go, yeah, it's not the right thing. That's not what I was looking for.
What? No, yeah. So it's similar but different. So that first one is called a click through, right? So who sees it and clicks it, and then
Mm-hmm.
after that, who is looking at it and then converts.
Yes.
And so the conversion rates will vary by industry and product. But what's interesting is organic usually has a higher conversion rate. And if you think about why, especially when it's on, Facebook ads, more so than Google ads, because what happens is when you display a paid ad, you're largely interrupting the visitor and you're trying to capture their attention. And so there's a different conversion rate and there's also a different type of landing page user experience. So when we interrupt somebody, we capture their attention. If we get lucky to hold their attention for a minute, we want to get them in and out. And so that's why a lot of times when you click on a paid ad, it's like really short form, basic information, really flashy, high call to action, buy the thing and move on. Because they know that they capture your attention. And that's not what you originally set out to do 10 seconds before you saw the ad. Now, organic's different because organic, I went to Google and I have a problem I'm trying to solve. And so I want information and I'm looking for somebody that has the answer and that I can trust and looks authoritative. And so that's why traditional websites work better on organic because you need long form content, you need FAQs, you need credibility. And so because I had an intent to solve a problem, I went there needing to convert on something. And so that's why the conversion rates are generally higher.
It reminds me of a workshop that Callan Rush did years ago, and she was talking about the 3% that are ready to buy, the 30% that don't know that they need your product, but when you
Mm-hmm.
show it to them, they're like, "Oh wow!" And then there's the 30% that know that they need your product, but they're not ready to buy right now. And then there's the 30% or whatever the numbers are, that they're never going to buy your product or whatever it is. So
Mm-hmm.
what you're speaking to is that when somebody's saying is, yeah, I know I have a problem and and I want to solve it, that they're much more inclined to actually take action on that. That's really good.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So let's talk about shift gears here from the entrepreneurial perspective, because you do run a multi-million-dollar business and you have a team of people and all the things, clients and so forth, responsibilities, but you also take time for family. And I know that there's a lot of purpose-driven entrepreneurs that we can easily get immersed in our work and kind of forget everything else that's going on around us, and to the detriment of our relationships, health, all the things.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how do you prioritize family and while still building your business and not letting the one crowd out the other?
Yeah, it's been something that I've been aware of even before I had kids. And it's probably one of the few things that I can't entirely put my finger on, where that seed was planted. But I remember, before when my wife was pregnant with her first kids, we've been together 20 years, we have three kids. And I remember when she was pregnant with her first kid, I was sitting in the living room of our old house and, the reality of like, a kid's on the way and you thinking about all the things you future pace. And I was like, you know what, I need to grind this out now while I can, right? I need to put in the extra time now while I can because I don't want to have to be forced to sacrifice or make choices later. And so that kind of birthed the idea of like, okay, prioritize family. And part of that, going back a little bit before that, was my childhood. So I'm the oldest of seven. I grew up lower middle class, never had disposable income, had an alcoholic stepdad. And so when you're in those environments, it's usually one or the other. Either you repeat it or you break it. And so I was very proactive in the beginning, going, okay, like everything became a positive, right? And so when there was a negative moment the way my mind would process it was, how do I not do that when I have a family and I have kids? And okay, financial struggles, how do I prevent? Okay, financial stability is the opposite of that. And so I started to pay attention to those things and just become very positive thinking and driven. So then when we had kids, and still to this day, and I'll give you an example even this week, it's always prioritizing them. And so what I do is um, there's chunks of time in my calendar that are always unavailable. So like in the morning between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m., those are blocked off on my calendar. So somewhere between 7 and 8, my kids wake up. Then I can spend an hour with them before they go to school. Then same thing in the evening between 3 and 4 p.m. It's blocked off. 5 p.m. our auto attendants shut off. And so the same things I do for myself, I do for my team too. I don't give clients my cell phone number. I tell my team not to give clients my cell phone number. All of their phones that ring through shut off at 5 as well. I tell them they have no obligation to check their emails after 5. We put in the contracts. We love you guys. We love our families too. So here's the rules of engagement. We don't do on-demand meetings. In fact, we shouldn't even need to do meetings at all if we're doing our job correctly. And so if you set proper expectations and establish those boundaries, your clients, this is usually weird for newer entrepreneurs to hear, and it sounds all scary, but it actually creates trust with your clients. And then they see you more of an authority figure, and it helps you help them and vice versa. So I just schedule everything, and then I make sure to go out of my way. To the part that I struggle with sometimes is, even though I spend a lot of time with them, is mentally being present sometimes. And so to help with that, I schedule like one-on-ones. And so I'll have my kids pick a place that we fly to for the weekend. As soon as I get off this phone call, we're taking my wife and our three kids. We're flying to Florida. I'm in Utah. Our Real Salt Lake team gets to play Miami, and my son's obsessed with Messi. And so we're checking him out of school for 2 days, and we're gonna go watch the RSL Miami game. My wife and I just got back last night. We did a one-on-one weekend just ourselves. And I realize that not everybody has the opportunity to do those things. But what you want to take away is the concept of find the time to do something within the availability that you do have that's just dedicated to what matters to you, whether it's your spouse, your girlfriend, if you have kids, if you don't have kids, whatever it is, figure out a time in a repeatable fashion that you can allocate to be on some sort of reoccurring frequency.
Yeah, I think if you don't put it in, what is it like? Stephen Covey talks about the big rocks, right? If you don't put the big rocks in first, they don't fit
Mm,
in later.
yeah.
And so, yeah, I don't think there's any one of us that at the end of our days and we're lying on our deathbed that we're gonna be like, man, I wish I had more time at the office. I wish I
Hmm.
spent more time on that project, or whatever. It's going to be the experiences with
Yeah.
family, and those are the memories, and that's the legacy that we're also building for the future too. So, and I love the fact that you actually encourage your team, not just you, but your team to do the same thing. I don't hear that very often. A lot of times I'll hear, and maybe they do it. We don't haven't mentioned it or whatever, but they'll learn to prioritize for themselves. But I
Hmm.
had a guest on a few years back, James Linhoff, and he actually had a financial services wealth management company and had about 30, 40 people. And he would say to them, look, after 5, like, I'm not going to be here. So you working to 7 is not going to get you any brownie points or whatever, right? Because
Hmm.
I'm not here. I won't know. And I'd really rather you go home and enjoy your family because you'll be far more rested. You'll have quality of life, all of that. And when you come back tomorrow, you're going to be much more effective than if you worked late, and are tired and all that stuff. And then on Fridays, they would close, not just in the summertime year round, they would close at noon.
Hmm.
And people would be like, how in the financial services industry, like how do you do that? It's kind of like lawyers going home at noon. Doesn't
Hmm.
doesn't usually happen. And yet, what they found is because they did that, their people were rested, they were happier, there was lower turnover, of course, and they're more engaged in their work. And so actually one of their employees actually came to him and said, so and so down the street, one of the other firms was starting to do the same thing. And he's like, that's great. Like, because he was kind of
Hmm.
thinking, oh no, this is like our unique thing. And he's like, no, no,
Competitive
no,
advantage.
no,
Yeah.
actually, this is great. Yes, let's
Yeah.
start this trend. you
But
know, that's a good
it's,
trend to start. I think that if we started to shift that mindset from grinding it out, and that entrepreneurship has to be hard, and it's a mindset, right? You have to work long hours, and you got to sacrifice your family indefinitely, and there's a season where you're building it and setting it
hmm.
up. That's one thing, but you're building it with intention that one day you can actually, and not too long in the future,
Yeah.
that you can build something that will give you free you up the time. But I think it's also something like what I'm hearing with you is that it's doing it even in the midst of that, not waiting for that opportunity.
Yeah, I think you're right with seasons. I mean, I certainly did the long days in the beginning. And but I always tried to once my kids, got past 2 and they could, rationalize the world a little bit, then it was like, okay, I can't be working the late nights and the weekends all the time anymore. So there certainly is value in when you have the availability to establish a foundation of something that's strong. But it is a choice of those sacrifices, because it's either sacrifices now or compounding sacrifices later. So sometimes you do need to make a choice. And that's not to say that I don't have, still seasons, like you said, where I got to put in an extra day or two. But for the most part, it's an open schedule. And because I put on in that time when I had the opportunity. But it's just a matter of everybody's different. Everybody has different priorities. Everybody has different availability. Everybody has different interests. And so what works for one doesn't work for other, but it's important that you be honest with yourself and go, what does matter to me?
Yeah. Yeah. And that relational equity is there so that if you do need to spend that weekend, if it is a priority for you, relationships like that, family, that you can take a weekend and your family's not freaking out because you haven't done it 16 times before. But
Hmm.
now you're like, okay, this one weekend dad's working, not a big deal. Right. But if you're
Yeah.
working every weekend, it becomes a big deal. So yeah.
And if you have that moment, I had that moment a couple weeks ago, and my kids get excited and they come down right at 5 because they know 5 is usually when I call it a day. And I just had to be honest with him. And I said, because it was like 2, 3 days in a row where he came down at 5. And I said, look, I just have a couple extra things I got to do. I'm hoping I can get it over with as quick as possible. But if I don't do it now, it's going to take me weeks instead of days. So thank you for being patient. Just give me another day or two.
Yeah, that's good. Communication is important. So you have a free gift for our listeners. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so I wrote a best-selling book on SEO. We kind of talked about actually a lot of things that are relevant to it, the why, because there's so many myths and false truths. And the thing that's ironic about SEO is when somebody publishes an optimized piece of content, it's been optimized. And so it sits out there for a long time, whether it's still accurate or not. And so a lot of times when you search things, it's outdated. And so I ended up writing a book. It took me about 2 years because I didn't want to write a book just to say I wrote a book. I wanted actually to be value added. And the biggest reason I wrote it, it certainly has benefits in being providing credibility and authority, but I honestly wrote it mostly because I was so frustrated with the garbage that was out there. And so when there were people that would come to us as leads and, there's a financial commitment involved that I understand sometimes isn't affordable, but I still wanted to help them, but I also couldn't help them in depth at the expense of the people that are paying me. And so I was like, how do I help both of these people? So I just wrote a book that documents all of our processes. And but what's funny is the first sentence in the book says, let's be honest, a book about SEO doesn't sound like the sexiest topic. And so I had to find the balance of going, okay, how do I help people and tell them tactical strategies while holding their attention? And so I started with stories. And so one of them was the Bachelor story. I did something similar where I outranked a $100 million automotive brand. And then I got a cease and desist. And so like fun things like that, but they hold your attention, but they continually emphasize the power of what's possible. And so throughout these stories, I weave in just little subtle hints of, this is how you do it. And then, and so whether you're experienced with SEO or you know absolutely nothing about it, I had to bridge the gap between both those audiences. So that's why it starts with fun things that will educate newer audiences, but will hold the attention of more experienced people. It'll educate you on terminology and verbiage. And then by the time you get a third into the book, then it goes, okay, here's how you do it. Everything I just told you that I did that's fun, here's how you can do it. And then it walks through the concepts. And then kind of the last third is like, okay, here's the very tactical stuff. And then there's also a chapter in there that says, here's not how to get ripped off. Like if you're shopping SEO, these are the things you should ask your agencies, and these are how they should respond that proves that they're qualified. Or if they say this, run as fast as you can. so, so I wrote a book largely just to kind of help out those that are either wanting to do it on their own or qualify an authoritative industry or expert to make sure they're getting their money's worth.
Oh, I love that. Fantastic. Fantastic. I love that. And we'll make sure that link is in the show notes, of course, along with your website. And you have seonational.com. And then, of course, you have your own website, damonburton.com. We'll make sure that's all in the notes so that people can reach out to you and follow you on social and continue to learn and understand how to use SEO. Because, our audience is, they have messages, they have businesses they want to grow, they have messages they want to get out there to the world. They're purpose driven, and SEO is important. I mean, you can have the greatest thing, but if nobody knows about it, you can't get your message in front of the right people, then
Mm-hmm.
it's very short lived. So that's why I wanted to bring you on to give us a little bit of tactical as to how do we actually do that, where we get that message out there to the right audience, legitimately to the right audience, and bring value to them and help make a difference. So thank you for helping us do that today.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thanks, Nicole.
Yeah, likewise. For our listeners, I always say that leaders of transformation take action. Maybe there's something in here you go, we need to revisit our SEO strategy, or maybe this helped you to look at things a little bit differently in terms of not constantly trying to optimize and re-optimize, but to really look at what is the intent of what you're trying to do. There's so much in this conversation. I would encourage you, if you learned something from this, which I'm sure you did, is to take action on it. Maybe even going back and re-listening and hearing the finer distinctions that Damon has shared is really, really powerful. So I encourage you to do that. Take action on something today. All the information in the world is not going to do anything until you actually do something with it. That's where the transformation happens. So we'd love to hear how this has impacted you. You can go on leadersoftransformation.com, find us there. Of course, find us on social as well. We'd love to hear how this has impacted you, and anything we can do to help support you along the way as you are becoming a leader of transformation in your respective community and wanting to get your message out there as well. So we appreciate you. Thanks for being here, and we look forward to seeing you next week on another episode of the Leaders of Transformation.